So what we're going to try and do with the Institute is recognize that there are two problems. The first problem is the climate problem, which people are very familiar with. Climate change is having a moment. 2023 was the hottest year. This is probably going to break that record. If you were outside, it's the end of October. It's a little bit hard to believe what the weather is. But of course, that takes other forms too. It's not just a more pleasant fall in Chicago. This is a picture from India where we have now there are extraordinary days that are over 40 degrees C and 45 degrees C in the summer. And that impairs people's lives in very consequential ways. It causes premature death. It causes crops to fail. It makes it difficult for people to live. Difficult for people to go to work. And that is one manifestation. Another manifestation of these higher temperatures is here we have poor Asheville, North Carolina, where there's not supposed to be hurricanes. And it's not that, oh, there was a hurricane. There was Hurricane Elaine. And you can see the damage from that here as well. It's also unleashed wildfires in a way and in places that we had not previously thought possible. So if you needed summary measures, I love numbers. One summary measure is CO2 concentrations in the atmosphere before the Industrial Revolution were 280 parts per million. They're now 419. They're going up by 2 to 3 per year every year now. What is that producing? It's produced more than a 1.3 degrees C increase in temperature. When I began working on climate change, I'm a graduate of the Chicago Public Schools. I had a super hard time with Fahrenheit to Celsius, but I have now mastered that. Okay, the second goal, which is interrelated and interconnected to the first goal, and that shouldn't be missed, is the world's need for growth. And there's a lot of ways to try and articulate that. I find pictures are often more powerful than words. And here you have, this is a setting in India, this young schoolgirl trying to study at night and her brother in the background. But low incomes are causing this. They're causing people to lead shorter and sicker lives, just like climate change is. They're causing people to have extraordinarily unpleasant jobs. The things that machines should do, they're doing with their bodies. And so the need for growth around the world almost goes without saying. And of course, it's most evocative when you have these kinds of images. And in fact, many parts of the world have started to grow, and we'll see that in some data as we go along here in a minute. And that growth has been unlocked by access to energy. And the world does not have an example of a society becoming wealthy and all the comforts that come along with that without consuming lots and lots of energy. And of course, that's even true in Chicago. There's families that aspire to better lifestyles for themselves and their children, and that runs through increased energy consumption. So that's not bad per se. The challenging part is that historically, fossil fuels have been the cheapest option for finding energy in many settings around the world. This is just one chart. Our team, I had planned to have 37 charts. Our team has bargained me down to a couple. So you should be grateful to them. So this is just annual CO2 equivalent emissions in billions of tons, and it's just from 1990. And you can see the upward march. Now, the world has agreed to try to limit climate change to 1.5 degrees. What would have to happen to attain that? That's what this line shows you here. And you can see it would be an incredibly dramatic reduction in CO2 emissions. And there's been a lot of progress in reducing the rate of increase. And in fact, what we're on is a trajectory that looks a little bit more like that. The reason is, and the reason that it can appear that there's a tension between these goals of climate and growth is that fossil fuels are projected to remain the cheapest in many settings around the world. So it's these two ideas, climate and growth, and kind of the question, must they really be in conflict with each other, that animate all that we're trying to do with the Institute. and I will claim no credit, but you guys, there should be lots of oohs and ahs for what's coming here. Whoa, look at that. And there is what we are trying to do with the Institute is to find a balance between those two goals, and that animates everything that we do. And let me just give you a flavor of that. Of course, announcing and launching the Institute for Climate and Sustainable Growth. So what are we going to actually try to do? There's been some foreshadowing from our president. So the first thing, if you're in a university, is research is the thing. You wake up in the morning, I'm going to write a better paper than I did yesterday. And so education, depends when the undergraduates, education is first, research is second. And then we're going to have a great focus on, and I'm going to come back to this, global reach and the importance of engaging with the whole world. Okay, so let's just talk about research. So we're at the University of Chicago. I engage pleasantly in many faculty meetings in my department. And in my department, every problem is an economics problem. And if only the world would listen to the economists, we would have such a better world. And so we're going to bring some of that, not too much of that, but we're going to bring some of that to what we try to do and really have at the core that the balance between climate and growth in many ways reflects the kinds of markets that we're willing to set up and the structure of those markets that will allow us to achieve better versions of that. And at the center of that will be the Energy Policy Institute, which I've been leading for the last decade. We have a 12 to 15 highly devoted faculty, all with tattoos on their arm, who have now a track record of producing high impact research, both inside academic journals, but great emphasis has been put on trying to make sure that those ideas get into the wild and affect the world around us. And so some examples of that are a group of researchers involved, myself included, with EPIC, had this idea, hey, cap and trade markets or pollution markets have been so successful in rich countries around the world, yet they're not used very frequently in poor countries, or they're not used at all in poor countries, and maybe that would better help balance the need for growth and pollution and climate. And so we ran an experiment, a real live experiment, and the results were pretty amazing. Pollution went down, industry's compliance went down. You had, in the wonky terms of experiments, you have the treatment group and the control group. By the end, the control group was lobbying the government to be put into the market because they preferred that relative to the existing form of regulation. And the result was the government was like, oh, we know what to do with this. We're going to scale this up. And so now there's multiple pollution markets in India, and we're trying to take this idea more broadly. A second area, this just to illustrate the kinds of work that we aim to do, is, as the provost mentioned, I was involved in some others and some research demonstrating that the costs of air pollution were greater than people had realized, and not just that academics were unaware of them, but real human beings were unaware of them. And so we took that idea and have developed something called the Air Quality Life Index, which is a tool that provides people a way at 25,000 locations around the world what is the air pollution they're breathing and what is the consequences on their life expectancy. And that's proved very useful. People have been able to make better choices about how they lead their lives and even apply pressure to governments to reduce air pollution. And then another area that is an example is the work on trying to project what the estimates of climate change will be. And this is truly, every president and provost instructs their faculty to do interdisciplinary work, and then you spend a few minutes talking to someone from some other discipline, and they speak a different language, and then you quit. But here we actually persevered, and we've got climate scientists, computational experts, even some economists, trying to project what the damages from climate change will be for the world, and then also at the level of about 12,000 regions around the world. Think of them as like a US county. That work has helped inform the US government's official estimate of what the damages from climate change will be, and we're launching a new project to help localities figure out how to adapt to the damages that they're going to face. You know, if you're in Miami, it's not really helpful to know what's going to happen in Bangladesh. Okay, the second research pillar, and I'm poorly equipped to do this in the presence, and humiliating to do this in the presence of Shirley Mung, who's going to lead these efforts, is the Energy Technologies Initiative. And you know, I'll give my kind of very rough version of it, and hopefully without too much scorn from Shirley, which is every plan that for reducing carbon emissions you should point to Shirley. It depends on Shirley. It all runs through figuring out better storage. We're not going to be able to green the grid unless the batteries get better and less expensive. People are not going to buy EVs at mass scale unless the batteries get less expensive. And so we have a lot riding on Shirley. And at the center of this Energy Technologies Initiative is the need to drive down the cost and the performance of improve the performance of batteries. Shirley's directing it. As the president mentioned a moment ago, Shirley is leading a DOE hub on energy storage that was recently awarded. It was a great honor for the university in recognition of Shirley and her colleagues' work, and is already achieving breakthroughs in trying to help the world move beyond lithium-ion batteries. Another thing I just want to emphasize in our effort to engage with the real world is, of course, the greatest scale-up organization in the world is the private sector. And this is a setting where there are opportunities. Shirley's inventions and her colleagues' inventions can go into the batteries and the phones and the grids that we use. And so she's put together a really impressive energy transition network of companies who want to learn and stay on the frontier of what understanding is so that they can see how to improve the products they produce. Okay, and then the third research pillar is we somewhat audaciously decided that there should be a new field called climate systems engineering. It covers a lot of intellectual space. I like to think of it, and again, this is embarrassing to do in front of my colleague David Keith, who I'm sure will have notes for me on how I'm describing it incorrectly, ranges from pulling CO2 out of the atmosphere to finding ways to cool the planet in the face of the accumulation of CO2 in the atmosphere. And when the original faculty committee that wrote a plan for the university got together, it was very clear this would work if we were able to hire David Keith away from Harvard, and it would fail if we didn't. And thankfully, David Keith is here. And he's leading this effort. It's an incredibly important effort. They'll be turning over and upside down and sideways these technologies to understand their technical strengths, their technical weaknesses, as well as their social strengths and governance weaknesses. It's an incredibly important effort. Okay, so the second thing that universities do, and again for the undergraduates, I don't know who screwed up my slides, education should have come first. Let me tell you what our plan was. And I see my son here, so I will pick on him a little bit. And I feel sometimes at dinner with my son and his two siblings, there's a little re-education that has to go on, where they have a very one-sided view of the climate, what I like to think of the climate and growth problem. And in truth, they haven't lived, they may visit it, but they haven't lived in a place where incomes are very low, or energy consumption is very low. And so kind of with them in mind, but obviously much more broadly than that, we developed, and David Weisbeck, who's here, has been leading this effort, what we're calling the Chicago Curriculum on Climate and Sustainable Growth. And the idea is a new way of understanding this balancing act that society faces. And it will require all students to see the problem from a real 360-degree perspective, not just from a particular angle. And the way it's going to accomplish that is it has a series of core courses that everyone will have to take. This is going to manifest in ideally an undergraduate program and a series of master's programs in climate science, in climate and energy economics, politics and the law of energy and climate, energy technology and energy systems, We're even going to have a humanistic or humanities course on the relationship between humans and the planet over very long time scales and how to think about that. Climate impact, course on climate impacts and adaptation, and incorporating international perspectives on energy and climate. And then again, someone has snuck into this. This is the course I'm going to teach. Evidently, it's the last one in the core, but we'll discuss that later. Having completed that core, what students will then do is find some area that speaks to them that they can specialize in. That might be climate science, that might be climate politics, economics, and society. These are the ones that signed up already. Climate finance, energy and climate technology, and then we look to grow these areas of specialization even more. In talking about the educational program, it would be amiss, I think, not to talk about one course that we think is especially unique. And that is there's going to be a capstone experiential learning course. So it's one thing to sit here and learn about all these things in the classroom in some, obviously it was very compelling faculty, but in some kind of abstract way. And so we've devised an experiential course where the students, now having got this 360-degree perspective, will go to rural India. And they'll see what it's like to live with a couple hundred kilowatt hours of electricity. They'll then go to West Texas and see what like a booming fracking town looks like, and why energy production is so important to so many people. They'll then have to go to Wall Street and meet ruthless capital allocators who only care about return on investment. And then they'll go to Washington and get to meet with policymakers. And out of those divergent viewpoints, they will have to, ideally, they'll have the tools to hold these multiple competing thoughts in their head and ideally produce better leaders and better citizens. And so that's what our aim is. The last thing I want to mention is our intended global reach. So there's a lot of ways, as I said, so we'll go back one slide. This is a picture of Bangkok, but as I said, I find numbers comforting in their own way, or clarifying is maybe the right way to say it. And so this is, here I've put electricity consumption. Probably many of you have not heard of the state of Bihar, India. It's got 130 million people in it. That's more than a third of the United States. There, the average person is consuming 200 kilowatt hours of electricity per year. So what is a kilowatt hour? Well, if you want a context, in the United States, it's 13,000. So those guys are off by not like a factor of 5 or a factor of 10. They're off by a factor of 65. And they're going to be incredibly devoted to increasing that. Then it kind of almost follows that 80% of projected greenhouse gas emissions in the remainder of the century are actually going to come from places, there's lots of Bihars, are going to come from places like Bihar or from the non-OECD countries. And that recognition, which is I would not call deep math, is one that is going to animate all that we do through research and education. And very fortunately, the university has centers in Beijing that we're going to leverage, and have been leveraging, both for research and education. There's a center in Delhi that a lot of my research has flown through there, or flowed through there. There's the terrific center in Hong Kong, and there's the new John Boyer Center in Paris. And so those will all be kind of making sure that we're staying honest and true to the problem that the world is confronting. And so the last thing I'll talk about briefly is when we started this, we did a listening tour, and it sounds like the president had his own listening tour when he started. And what was really surprising was, it was not very surprised about the students, but what was surprising was the depth and breadth of interest from the faculty. And we realized like we're sitting on this monster that needs to be unlocked. And so another aim of the Institute is to catalyze in all of U Chicago approach. And so that's going to be on the research side, seeding new research ideas. The Institute's going to act as a hub for climate research and ideas. There's this 150 faculty who have raised their hand that they're interested. We're going to provide research resources for funding for projects, and that's already launched. We're going to have conferences and workshops where people can sharpen their ideas, visitor programs, and more and more. And in fact, if you have an idea, please let us know. And then on the student side, the aim is all this amazing energy can be channeled to something really productive. And so we have these career tracks where people are going to learn about jobs in energy or in climate. There's a career fair downstairs. Obviously, you shouldn't leave while any of us are talking, but it's amazing. There's 50 companies down there. There's undergraduates passing out their resumes left and right. That we want to expose them to what the world is like outside of Chicago. And there'll be plenty of opportunities for funded research assistantships and internships. Okay, so let me try and close with the mission that I'm going to hold myself to and that we're going to hold ourselves to really comes from the report that we wrote for the president originally. The Institute's mission must be to fundamentally alter climate research and education on a global scale. And I think what we missed is, and make sure that it interacts with the outside world. And so that's what we'll be doing every day. Thank you.